Hi, welcome to Boring Money, Rich Life. I'm your host, Joy Hicks, and today we're going to talk about a book that I'm reading, and it's called The Jewish Phenomenon: Seven Keys to the Enduring Wealth of a People. I actually just went on my phone to Apple Books and looked up just different finance books, and this is one of the ones that it actually recommended. So I'm kind of a big history person, and I just try to dive into different cultures. So I actually think that this is a good book to read because I do like to study how different people view money. And as I'm learning different money rules myself, I feel like it's definitely good just to learn about other cultures. So I am still reading this book. Most of the books that I shared with you guys are books that I finished already, but I felt like this one has a lot of information in it. So I'm like, why not share it in real time as I'm kind of learning these things? And like I said, you can get it on the App Store or online if you're interested in it as well. But there's definitely some good things that I wanted to pull out from it. So, one thing that I felt like the author did a really good job of in this book was kind of highlighting the discrimination and just a lot of the hardship that Jewish people have endured. So I felt like that was kind of like the beginning of the book, just trying to understand the history because there's definitely a lot of discrimination and a lot of stereotypes, especially when it comes to wealth and Jewish history and all these different things. So I felt like the book did a really good job of explaining the history, explaining the religion, before kind of diving into why wealth was so important to the Jewish community. So I felt like you get a really well-rounded understanding. You're not just reading stereotypes, you're actually reading about the history, reading about their faith, and just kind of having a better perspective. So once the author kind of moves from the history, he does kind of start talking about the Jewish community and their perspective on wealth. And so he was saying that in the Jewish community, wealth is considered a good thing. It's a very positive thing. Now, he does note that in Christianity, it's kind of the opposite. So he kind of dives into how, in Christianity, the perspective around money is typically negative, and he kind of highlights a couple scriptures, like Matthew 19 and 24, where it's saying it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. And then he talks about Luke 16 and 13, you can't serve God and money. So I felt like this was a very interesting perspective because Christianity is kind of I guess you would say, the more predominant faith of the Western culture, or especially in the US. And a lot of the biblical teachings does kind of imply or hint at the fact that having a lot of money isn't good. Whereas in the Jewish community, money is definitely viewed as a more positive thing. It's viewed as something to work towards, not something to kind of shy away from. So I felt like that was very interesting just because here in America, Christianity is kind of the more predominant faith, although we're a melting pot of many different cultures and many different religions and, all of that. But ultimately, Christianity is kind of the more predominant religion here. So I felt like it was a really good perspective for him to kind of compare the two because it does kind of change the way that people view money. I feel like here in the US, billionaires are definitely looked at as the evil people. Even you'll hear about in dating, people will be like, oh, you rather date a rich guy than date a good guy. And so it's kind of like having money and being good are never kind of seen as in the same boat. It's always money is evil and then being poor is good. So I think for us as people who are trying to change the way that we view money, trying to understand money, trying to build our own rich life, it's important to reframe your own views and how you think about money. So I felt like that was really good. Also in the book, the author talks about how in the Jewish community, education is very, very important. So it talks about how children will go to school. then they'll come home and then they're kind of like taught their own religion and they're doing a lot of studying in that standpoint. And then it was also talking about how college is not necessarily a question of if I will go to college. It's definitely like, what am I going to study and what college am I going to? So, for a lot of people in the Jewish community, college is definitely like a must. And I felt like that was also very interesting because, kind of in like the American perspective, we teach our kids follow your passion. And most kids are not passionate about learning, are not passionate about, doing the hard thing, which is like studying. And in the book, it was talking about how like delayed gratification is something that's taught and it's encouraged because education is so important. Now, we definitely know that like statistically, you're going to make more money the more educated that you are. So I felt like this section was really important because it was talking about, for one, choosing the right college. And so the reason why that is so important is because they're definitely valuing networking because the people that you go to college with, that's more than likely going to be the people who you do business with later on in life. That's going to be kind of like your peers as you're going through college. And then also, like, potentially your future spouse is somebody that you're going to meet in college as well. So it was saying that the Jewish community definitely encourage going to like Ivy League schools. And mind you, they're valuing education from a very early age. And so that's definitely a great goal and a goal that they're kind of shooting for. But it was saying if that's kind of not possible, maybe like due to costs or something like that, then you want to try to go to the next best college possible. And then it was saying that like community college is typically avoided. And as I was reading it, I was kind of getting the impression that it's just because they want to give their children the best start and they want their children to kind of specialize in things like medicine and law and accounting or a very like high paying profession. So typically, the better school that you go to, the better education you're going to get in those fields. So I did think that was very, very interesting. And then the book also highlighted on like entrepreneurship in the Jewish community. And so it was saying that the Jewish community, they definitely encourage their children to go to college, but entrepreneurship is kind of baked in that as well. If you think about becoming like a doctor or becoming a lawyer or an accountant or something like that, typically, eventually, you might want to branch out and have your own practice. And I do love that within the book, it did talk about the reasons why starting your own business is so important because again, there was a lot of discrimination that that community was experiencing. So a lot of times that was kind of the only option was to kind of build your own thing so that way you could have more control of your own life. So I felt like again, it does a very good job of not only highlighting like the principles and the values, but also the history. And so within the entrepreneurship section, because it kind of goes like into a deeper dive there as well. It was talking about how Carl Vesper, he kind of highlights like 10 different types of businesses because the book was saying like entrepreneurship and that term, like being an entrepreneur, it's used so much today that it kind of like loses its meaning because everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, which is something great to aspire for. That's definitely probably one of the ways that you're going to build wealth. Like having a regular 9 to 5 definitely is not a clear path to building wealth. So it makes sense why a lot of people want to be an entrepreneur. But he kind of goes through and outlines what he considers to be the 10 types of businesses that you should kind of prioritize or the way that you should actually structure your business. So the first one, he talks about individuals, and that could be like tradespeople, store owners, jewelers, or even like personal service people. So kind of again, like the doctors, lawyers, accountants, and dentists. Then he talks about builders, and that could be like craftspeople, or it could be professionals who hire others to kind of perform the duties for them. Then he talks about independent inventors or innovators. And so it kind of goes down the list of like well-known people within their community who are these big like inventors and getting Nobel Prizes and all these different things. And then fourth, he talks about like pattern multipliers. And so that's talking about like expanding your business by franchising or like a chain. So think about like owning a Chick-fil-A, owning a Popeyes or something like that. And then he talks about economy of scale, and that's talking about producing something or producing products at a lower cost and then kind of building a business around those things. And I feel like this one, number five, is where the majority of people kind of build their businesses around. So again, I said like entrepreneurship is very trendy, which is not a bad thing, right? But this is kind of where most people go to when they think of like starting a business. So think about like when drop shipping became such a big thing, right? It was like, okay, go online to Alibaba, buy some jewelry for maybe like 30 cents a piece, and then sell that, get a website and sell it for maybe like $15. Now, mind you, we have like tariffs happening and all of these things. So that might not be a great business model, but he did talk about how, like in the late 1800s, the early 1900s, when a lot of immigration was happening to the US, he was talking about how there was a lot of different like trades and things like that, like clothing and jeans and all these different skills that the Jewish community brought to the US, and then they were able to kind of build a business around that. Then he talks about capital aggregators. And so that's talking about pulling together capital to create a financial service business. Then he talks about acquirers, which is buying businesses as a means to expand or get into business. Then he talks about buying slash selling, where you buy and sell a business at a profit, which kind of sounds like the same thing, but acquiring could mean like buying a smaller company to kind of expand your own. Think about like, let's say you have like a larger bank buying like a smaller credit union or something like that, and they're kind of like acquiring all of their customers to expand their own network. That's more acquiring. And then buying and selling is really just like buying a business with the intention to kind of sell and profit from that business. And then number nine, he talks about conglomerates, which is the use of equity of an existing business to buy others. And then number 10, he talks about making money through investments like stocks, bonds, securities, real estate, and commodities. And that's kind of what we talk about a lot on this channel. But that's kind of where I'm at right now with this book. I think I'm only kind of like 60 pages in, and it's already a lot of information, which is really good information. Like I said, I do like to study about like different cultures, and I do again feel like this author is very respectful in the way that he talks about the discrimination, talks about the history, and then also talking about like wealth as a positive thing. One other thing that he did share in regards to education was just kind of like rewarding your children for good grades. And I felt like this one was kind of interesting because in America, it's kind of like, oh, when you're raising your kids, like they should do things because you tell them to do it. So you should raise them that they need to get straight A's and they should just get straight A's regardless. And I feel like there's a lot of truth in that, but also thinking about like yourself, right? When you go to work every day, you have a reward in your mind. That's why a lot of times we'll try to climb the corporate ladder because we're looking to make more money because that money is our reward. So if we as adults want to be rewarded for our time, our effort, you know, and get something back, I wonder why we don't look at children the same way. So I thought it was pretty interesting that it was saying that, again, like rewarding your children for earning straight A's and getting into a great college is kind of encouraged among that community. So I thought that was kind of like a little nugget. I actually did that with my daughter. I was like, hey, you know, if you get your grades up and do all these things, we'll go do something for the summer. And that has been working actually. So I think, again, there's just a lot that I felt like the book kind of highlights on. And as I continue reading, I'll definitely make another video. I'll probably try to do that in my next video so you guys can kind of see what else is in the book. But as always, what is one boring thing that you can do today to start fueling your rich life? Again, I'm your host, Joy Hicks. Thank you for watching and be sure to subscribe.